this week's video, I thought we could do a little reading journal update type of vlog. I did a video like this a couple months ago where I basically just updated and made a couple spreads in my reading journal dedicated to some of the books that I was recently reading, and I thought we could do another one today because I'm honestly a little bit behind. I haven't been making a whole lot of book review spreads this whole year, and I am really wanting to kind of catch up on that. I'm also very much starting to think about setting up my reading journal for next year, and I'm thinking that one of my goals for next year when it comes to my reading journal is to make more dedicated book review spreads. I've kind of in the past only done it for favorite books, like 5-star, 6-star reads, but I just really enjoy making them and I really want to start making more of them. So I think next year, I don't know if my goal was going to be to make a spread for every single book that I read, but I definitely want to start making more book review pages in general. So this video will be like a little bit of a vlog journal with me catch up, and I think also maybe starting next year it could be fun to do one of these videos maybe every month and kind of just check in and catch up and make some fun spreads of my reading journal. I actually have quite a few books that I want to make spreads for, so I'll pick out a couple to do today and I'll do a voiceover as well to kind of walk you through the process of how I'm making each spread, and then maybe also talk a little bit about the book itself that I'm journaling about. I think this could be a fun way in the future next year to do like a combination of a reading wrap up and a journal with me, so let me know if you like this style of video. But we'll just go ahead and get right on into it. I hope you enjoy, and let's go and do some journaling. The first book that I'm making a journal spread for is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. This is a book that I read back in the summertime and I absolutely loved it. Also the first classic that I read this year, and I've been meaning to make a spread for it for a while, so I'm excited to finally do one. I wanted to keep this spread fairly simple and just kind of capture that gothic, classic, very kind of literary type of feeling that the book brings about, so I just used a couple different scrapbook papers, a black one that I ended up using for the lettering, and then I had the perfect kind of vintage book paper that I thought would look really cool as well for this spread. The first thing that I did is I used the black paper and just kind of ripped up a couple pieces to do the title. The general layout and format of the spread was very much inspired by my previous book spread that I made for Dracula, just because I really like how that turned out. I love using a white gel pen on top of black paper. I feel like it always looks really nice. So once I ripped up all the different papers for the words Dorian Gray, I went over with my white uniball signo gel pen and just did the gothic font that kind of matched the cover. That's always definitely where I like to get my fonts a lot of the time for these book spreads, is I'll just kind of look at whatever font is used on the cover, and this Barnes & Noble edition of The Picture of Dorian Gray has really cool looking lettering, so that's kind of what I was recreating. I ended up going with a gold gel pen on top of the white just to give it a little bit more dimension, and I just love how gold and white look together on top of black paper. I think it just really pops and always turns out so nice. The rest of the spread I ended up keeping pretty simple, just using the different papers, and I just kind of layered them onto the corners to give a little bit more dimension and layering to the spread. And that was actually pretty much it for the decoration. I did a little gold outline, and then the majority of the spread I ended up filling with some of my favorite quotes. So it has been a few months since I finished up this book, and I am still honestly thinking about it. I definitely would love to reread this book very soon, and definitely for sure at some point in the future. It's just one of those books that really kind of makes you think, a book that you want to discuss and really kind of dissect. I do pretty often like to add quotes to my book review pages, but this in particular I think is one of the best, most quotable books I've ever read in my entire life. Oscar Wilde truly does have just a really clever way with words. There are some really funny quotes in here, there are some really beautiful imagery type of quotes, and also just really great musings and ideas about philosophy and art and beauty, all the different themes in the books. I think the quotes really represent them very well. Reading this book in the summer also kind of kick-started me getting a little bit more into classics, and I've now read 3 different kind of Gothic classics this year, and I've absolutely loved all of them. I'm hoping to carry this momentum into the new year and continue my reading of Gothic classics because I just have been really enjoying them, and I think that is very much thanks to this book. Okay, the next book that we're doing is one of my absolute favorites. We're doing Daughter of the Forest by Juliette Marillier. I read this back in August, and this is definitely going to be in my top probably 3 books, maybe 2 books that I've read this year. I just loved this story so much. Juliette Marillier is a kind of folktale, historical fantasy author that I've read for the first time this year and have really been getting into and really enjoying this year. I think I've now read 4 of her books. I've loved all of them, but there was just something extra special and extra magical about Daughter of the Forest. I truly think it is one of the best fantasy books I have ever read in my whole life. The overall feeling of the story is actually quite dark. There are a lot of darker themes. Definitely look up trigger warnings, I think, if you're going to go into this story. But I think what Juliette Marillier does so well in a lot of her stories is she's able to have this darkness and this depth and, real discussions about some very kind of gruesome experiences that our characters go through. But at the same time, these books tend to have such a magical, almost whimsical fairy tale atmosphere. This book was really the epitome of that, those darker themes kind of side by side with some really beautiful imagery with a very fairy tale-like storyline. And very much an ode to nature as well. I think this book romanticized and just described nature in such a beautiful way. So when I was thinking of how I wanted to make this spread, I definitely wanted to capture those things. I wanted it to feel very magical, a little bit kind of fairy-like, folktale-like. I had the perfect stickers from Journal Say that I recently picked up that just have the cutest little mushrooms. To add a little bit of layering, I also added some green scrapbook paper, which I just really loved, and then kind of to tie everything together, I did this border, which is one of my favorite little decorations to add in a lot of my different journal spreads. It's super easy to do. I just layer some different markers and add some kind of green vines crawling around the page. I feel like it always makes the spread look super magical. And then as far as the lettering goes, I really did want to kind of lean into that fairy tale storybook type of feel, so I ended up looking at some different fairy tale style fonts on Pinterest, and I just went and tried to recreate them to the best of my ability. I just kind of sketched them out using a fine liner, and then I also used some gold as well. I feel like gold and green always look really nice together. To finish off the spread, I added a picture of the cover, added some little stars and extra little glittery bits, and then filled in the extra space with some quotes as well. This is definitely another one of those books with really, really beautiful quotes. Juliette Marillier definitely has some very beautiful prose, and I've enjoyed the writing in all of her books, but as I was going back and looking at some quotes on Goodreads to fill in this page, I was reminded with just how beautiful the writing is in this story. I just want to like crawl back into this story. The good news is that this is actually the first book, I think, in a 6-book series, and you follow around, I want to say, different members of our main character Sorcia's family as they're undergoing their own different sort of magical trials. I'll have to look into a little bit more what the rest of the series is about, but that's definitely something that I'm very excited to pick up soon and going into the new year. It's always exciting when you find a new favorite book that is part of a longer series, because it just means that you have more time to spend in this world and with these characters. I'm also continuing to read and really enjoy Juliette Marillier's other books. The other series that I'm currently in the middle of is the Blackthorn and Grimm series, I think is what it's called, the first book being Dreamer's Pool, and I'm really enjoying that one. I kind of have just recently, just a little bit, started the second book in that series. When it comes to highlights of my reading year, I think Juliette Marillier and discovering her stories is definitely one. I'm so excited to read more of her books this year, read more of her books next year. Okay, the next 2 books that I'm doing, I've decided to do like half-page spreads. Majority of the time when I do book review pages, I'll do kind of those double-page spreads. I think that's also partly because I like to do spreads dedicated to a whole series, or oftentimes spreads dedicated to my favorite book, so I kind of just want more room. But because I'm trying to be a little bit more regular and consistent and prolific with these book review pages, I think approaching it from a little bit less of like a daunting standpoint, just in terms of having less page to work with, will maybe help me be a little bit more consistent with making them. Right now I'm making a half-page spread for the book Small Favors by Erin A. Craig, which I read in October. Honestly, I just really loved the imagery of this book. It definitely wasn't a favorite, and I ended up writing in my little review at the end of the spread how I feel very conflicted about this book, because I think there were a lot of issues I had with it, a lot of things that didn't fully make sense to me, but at the same time I loved the vision, I loved the setting, I loved the feeling I got while reading this story. And sometimes what inspires me to make these book spreads is not necessarily my love for a book, but it's just kind of like the visuals and the imagery that I get in my head while reading it. it's always fun to kind of try my best to capture the overall feeling into a journal page. For this spread, I also kept it fairly simple. I ended up mainly using some washi tape actually, this really nice kind of mustardy yellow gingham, and then I kind of layered that with a lighter pale yellow thinner washi tape. The book cover of Small Favors is yellow, and just the overall feeling of the book feels very yellow to me, and I think it's rare that I get to use my more yellow leaning stationery, so I was kind of excited to lean into that. The main decoration that I used for this spread were these kind of vintagey looking butterfly stickers. Also from Journal Say, I found some perfect yellow shaded ones that I thought would be really good for this page. I don't think there's anything specifically like butterfly related in this book. There's actually quite a bit of like bee imagery, but overall the cover and just the book itself has a lot of this kind of like summer nature feel, so I think they kind of captured that really well, even if it's not like directly correlated to the story. And then I decided to go a little bit of an easier, more simple route with the lettering for this. I used this website that just kind of generates these vintagey looking lettering fonts. It's a great resource, I think, if you ever want to just have like an easy lettering style for journal spreads, and you can customize the colors and the fonts and all that sort of thing. It always ends up looking, I think, really nice in journal pages. So that's what I ended up doing for this. That way I didn't have to go and do like hand lettering again, because that does take a long time, though it is really fun to do. For the rest of the page, I added another little gold border, and then what I did a little bit differently is that instead of adding my favorite book quotes to the actual like substance of the page, I did a little mini paragraph review, which is not something that I normally do. I don't know, I just don't always feel like I process book thoughts through writing a lot of the time. I like to talk about books, I like to kind of think about them and make visual spreads for them, but I don't always consolidate my thoughts into written form, and I kind of want to start doing that a little bit more often. I think it just encourages me to be a bit more thoughtful and reflective about the books that I read. I think it's just a great skill to be able to read or consume a piece of media and then be able to like discuss and write about it afterwards. I want to practice that skill a little bit more. Okay, moving on to the last book that I'm going to do in this video. This is another recent read. I read this one in October as well. This is Hemlock and Silver by T. Kingfisher. T. Kingfisher is definitely one of my favorite go-to authors. I feel like I can always count on her books being a really enjoyable time, but this one in particular, her latest release I believe, was I think so good and potentially my favorite T. Kingfisher book I've ever read. It's a bit of like a Snow White, I wouldn't even say it's a Snow White retelling, it just has some elements from Snow White, but it kind of really creates its own fantasy story. I think you don't really need to know a lot going into this book. It's a very fun, maybe a little bit cozy, a little bit humorous style of fantasy, but I think with a very interesting story. Our main character is like a poison expert, or I guess more specifically like an antidote expert, and she ends up being thrown in a situation where she has to solve a mystery of sorts and ends up being pulled into this like whole magical world. It was a really, really great read. The writing was great, the humor was great, I loved the main character, the world was very magical and very unique, and I just really, really enjoyed this book. As far as the spread goes, I honestly was just very inspired by the cover. I really love the cover of this book. I like the color palette and I like the font. So for the lettering, I did something pretty similar to what I did for the cover of Dorian Gray. I used more black paper. This time I cut it out instead of ripping it, just to give a little bit of a different effect. I used my same white gel pen and did some lettering that kind of matched the style on the cover. I also added a nice little border to this page. This is the border also that I kind of just recreated off of the cover because I really like the way it looked. I also had a couple different stickers from, I think, the washi tape shop that just had some different like little floral pieces. I used those to kind of frame where I was planning on sticking the cover. And then with the rest of the space, I just wrote more of my thoughts for this book. Really positive things, honestly, because I just thoroughly enjoyed this story. Okay, that is actually it for this spread and for this video. I'm so happy with how all these different pages turned out. I'm doing a little flip through now to show you how all these book review pages look. I really think a video like this is a great way to kind of catch up in my reading journal a little bit and also just chat about some recent books that I've been reading. So let me know your thoughts if you liked this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in my next one very soon.